Hey folks, it's Jason Dess here, Global Leader for Finance Performance at Deloitte. Welcome to the session. The speed and adoption of digital transformation continues to accelerate in the world of finance and IT. How is this acceleration going to impact IT investments for evolving organizations? Now more than ever, it's essential that finance and IT work together to ensure success. In this session, we'll explore those topics and also ask two industry leaders how they're building a more responsive organization and how they're adapting to the current crisis. With that, I'd like to introduce my two industry leaders who have graciously given their time to join us today. First of all, Chris Pass, Chief Financial Officer, John Muir Health. Chris, welcome. A couple of fun facts about Chris. One, he's a bit of a Star Wars Legos nut and is building out the Star Destroyer right now. He is also, during times of COVID, learning how to play the guitar. So Chris, good luck with that, and we hope to hear for a song from you shortly. I'd like to welcome Adam Stanley to the panel. Adam Stanley is the Chief Information Officer and Chief Digital Officer at Cushman & Wakefield. Adam's actually a very talented singer and hopes one day to be able to perform on Broadway. So Adam, good luck with that. He's also an avid traveler. He's traveled to 45 countries and is trying to get to 50 by 2023. So Adam, we hope you achieve your goal, especially during these times, but fingers crossed you'll get there. First and foremost, I wanted to touch on how the nature of work is changing. Remote work, telemedicine, online learning, so many examples out there in industry. People are now heavily relying on digital platforms to do their work. How have you adapted to those changes? And what does your plans for the future look like? Maybe Adam, I can start with you. I'd love your perspective on how these changes have really impacted your business.
Absolutely, Jason. Thank you so much for the question. I think it's an amazing time. To some extent, I think technology has really been there and moving in the right direction for the last several years, moving towards kind of a cloud first and a mobile first environment where people can work from wherever they need it to work. And I think the irony is that COVID really accelerated a lot of the trends we were already seeing. And so while it's going faster, a lot of the things are exactly the same things we would have predicted. People want to work wherever they want to work, and they can be productive whether they're at home, or they're in the office, or if they're in a Starbucks down the street.
Thank you, Adam. It really has changed the world in how we're operating, and interested that it's had such an impact on your world. Chris, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the challenges you've experienced at John Muir Health and touch on what effect this has had on your corporate culture.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. You know, we are a culture of being in the office, being with the patient, being together in meetings, and this really was a surprise for all of us to try to adapt. And at first we resisted it, but we, as Adam mentioned, have all the mobile and cloud tools which enable us to do this. And so we've really taken advantage of this flexibility and mobility that frankly once was enabled to let us talk and be together in our multiple locations. We now have spread those locations out to include the home. And frankly, a lot of our interaction is no longer via telephone or via email. We jump on a video call. And so we've really taken advantage of being closer together and sharing what we know through video and taking advantage of the technology so we can do a whole lot more today than we could really pre-COVID because we've taken down the barriers to change.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Great examples there. You mentioned some in the health industry. If you look more broadly, financial services with the acceleration of digital banking, you look in consumer products and the adoption of online ordering, we're really seeing a change in how people work and operate. And clearly, this is something that will continue as we move forward. I think one of the commonality we've seen around digital transformation, it's really exposed a clear divide between the folks that have invested before and the folks that are about or haven't invested yet in internet cloud-based technologies. I'd love your viewpoints around what you've seen around that investment and how your organizations have invested for the future and the successes you're seeing. And maybe Chris, we could start with you and your perspective on John Muir Health.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And one of the most challenging things for us right now is really that balance around, do we invest in the short run and the changes that are upon us with COVID? And then how do you balance those investments in the long run? And it's no secret that telehealth and telemedicine has really been the poster child of one of the true game changers related to COVID. And so we have doubled down on those investments with moving to, a good telehealth platform with video that everyone can use, that can be mobile, so it meets the customer where the customer wants to be met. And I think the initial changes were just the basics of, I need to see my doctor, so I'm going to see my doctor over video. What we've seen is really taking that technology and leveraging it, so now I can visit family and friends in the hospital. I can be with a new mom who's giving birth. I can do physical therapy over video. These are the things that we never really would have used video for, but now it's really expanded our capabilities. And so we're making those investments now to really drive and deliver on that, but also maintaining the long-term focus on having a strong infrastructure so we continue to change going forward.
Chris, thank you very much for that. It really, I think, demonstrates the investments that you've made as an organization initially, and now you're taking a strategic view of what you're going to do moving forward and where the value is. Thank you for sharing. Adam, I'd love your view on COVID-19's impact on digitization. If you could touch on some examples, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. I think the first thing I would do is thank Chris, because telehealth is really helpful for me and my family. Because we don't want to go to the doctor, so it's really helpful. But if you really think about it, and Jason, you alluded to this as well, it's impacting every single industry. And what's fascinating is what we're seeing is before COVID, everyone said, let's see how we can collaborate while we were remote. So when you talked about work from everywhere, it was really around collaboration. And it was kind of sharing documents and having meetings and engaging with your employees. Well, COVID really accelerated that, because now collaboration is just so much bigger. Telehealth is one example, but in my industry, it's actually showing properties. So if you are actually looking to invest in a property and you're trying to pick a location, the ability to actually meet interactively with someone who's in another city, another country, and do site selection and use geolocational information and immersively actually explore property and look inside floors, and all of those things would have been unheard of. And I think in the first few weeks of COVID lockdown, people kind of said, well, we'll just hold off on that. We'll have conversations now, but we'll wait until we're back in the office to really innovate and to do those things. And then as the lockdown continued, we realized that we couldn't wait. And so all of those folks, even those who had been most resistant to actually changing and to using digital, are now using it. And now they're asking for it in everything. They're like, well, if we can do this remotely, then can we also try these other tasks remotely as well? And so it's really unlocking, to me, innovation that we would not have been able to unlock if we hadn't had such a drastic change in the environment.
Adam, thanks so much for sharing. I mean, you've really touched on what I call the second wave of innovation there, that you've had a cultural change in the way people behave, and now they're asking for more, which is fascinating, and I think quite honestly applies across all industries, because everyone's going to move through the same. I'd like to ask you both a question around lessons learned. As we all know, in 2008, in the Great Recession, some lessons were learned. Many companies made strategic investments that allowed them to emerge stronger during that time, and really used as a platform for growth and a platform for thriving during the recovery. Adam, maybe I can ask for your perspective on that and touch on the type of investments that Cushman & Wakefield may be making based on experience with previous crises.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Jason, and it's really, really important. I think the biggest lesson from 2008 is that if you made smart investments, you actually emerged from that wave and you're leading. So if you think about all of the companies that were created during that recession, they're really the companies that are leading the economy now. The companies that really were strong in surviving that recession are the companies that are still strong now. And I think the biggest lesson that we learned is not to entrench, not to go back into the era of stupid, rash decisions, but instead to really think strategically about how finance and technology and talent management and all of those things, if done effectively, can allow us to emerge on the other side of the recession stronger than we did before. So I would say in 2008, innovation and technology would have been the first things cut from most people's budgets. In 2020, they're the last things. And I've literally had conversations with business leaders who are saying, we will look everywhere else that we possibly can before we cut technology, because we see now more than ever why it's so critical that we invest in digital technologies that advance the company. So I think, as ironic and horrible as this year has been, the awakening in most executives is going to help most industries, and those that are strong and actually make smart decisions are going to emerge like superstars.
Adam, thank you for raising that point. Just a fantastic view on how the world's changed around capital allocation. I'd like to flip that question to Chris, who as a CFO has traditionally been the traffic cop who would allocate capital, and maybe the person who did hold back or cut budgets through that. Chris, with that lens, I'd love your view of this time and a sense of what maybe has changed in your role or your perspective.
We framed this as, if we think about the economic loss that COVID brought on us, that came so fast and so deep, the question that we asked ourselves was, okay, we lost money. What do we get for that? What do we get for that investment? If we view the loss as an investment, what did we get? And we got two really valuable things. I think the world turned into analytics and looked at analytics very differently than we ever did in the past. And if we think about the early signals we got out of China and other areas like Italy, even New York, we were tracing what could happen here with COVID patients. And working in a health system, we wanted to make sure we had enough equipment, we had enough space, we had enough staff. And every day we would look at the analytics, and every day we would learn something. And we really started to become even more analytically driven than we ever had before. And so doubling down on those analytics is going to be incredibly important for us moving forward. And we believe we can do much better with that. And so that was something that we bought, if you will, with the investment due to COVID. The second thing is really becoming much more agile as an organization. And because things were changing so rapidly, we had no choice. We couldn't plan for 3 months. We couldn't think about it for two weeks. We had to move quickly. And as the world was changing around us, we needed to change with it. And as we were learning about whether it's a new drug or a new way to use PPE or a new technique to keep people well, a way to use a ventilator, these were things that we were trying and implementing very quickly. And so it enabled us in healthcare to be much more rapid in terms of adopting to change and driving change. And second, really focusing on the value that all this technology can bring to us through the use of analytics. And so it's really a positive thing for the industry that we're really excited about where we can take it.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. I think, for most folks probably watching this, one of the biggest challenges is how do I make analytics real and how do my investments move that way? And you gave some great examples. Thank you. Last question I have for you both, and we saved the best for last, is around the relationship of the CFO and CIO. Traditionally, I would say from my experience working with many global organizations, both large and small, the challenge of those two relationships working together can be difficult, sometimes prickly, but when it does work, it's very strategic and drives success. I would love both of your viewpoints around that and your take on how the CFO and CIO relationship will be important as it moves forward. And maybe Chris, I can start with your perspective.
It is incredibly important, and it has something that I've always focused on since I've gotten here. I do really like technology, so it makes it easy to relate with the CIO. And the reality in healthcare has been, as we've installed EMRs and we've put in electronic medical records, a lot of those technology investments did not make us go faster. They made us know more about the patient, but they weren't with the idea of efficiency behind them. I think the next great wave, as we focus on technology and partner with that CIO, is driving that efficiency. And that's something that I think gets CIOs very excited. It's something that gets finance very excited. And it's a way that we can lead and provide that service across our organization. And so it's something that's incredibly important for both the CIO and the CFO to be seen as a team and be seen there to help all the folks who are on the front lines and providing care.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that viewpoint and some real, I'd say, progressive thinking around how the relationship helps the organization's success overall. Adam, I'd appreciate your view. And do you see it in the same world as Chris, or are you seeing something different?
I do. I see it just like Chris, and I'm always happy to see another CFO that says they like and they appreciate technology. I think the irony is, and I wish I had known this 20 years ago when I was just starting my career, the easiest way for a CFO and a CIO to get along, and I would even extend that to a chief marketing officer and a chief HR officer, is to think from the perspective of the board. And I think when CFO-CIO relationships don't work, it's because they're thinking technology or they're thinking financial planning. But if you're thinking the way the CEO talks to the board, that's a language that you can both work on. So for me, my CFO, I know if I go into his office with a proposal, I need to be able to demonstrate the value it's going to add, either reducing our cost, improving our revenue position, reducing risk, or improving client satisfaction. If it can't demonstrably do one of those four things, of course, he's going to say no. But over time, he trusts that every decision I make is kind of thinking in terms of EBITDA, it's thinking in terms of profitability, and I think that changes the relationship. But again, whatever role you have in the organization, and Workday in particular works a lot with CFOs, CIOs, and CHROs, I'm finding that those three groups more than ever have to talk about the value that they can collectively drive to the organization. And those conversations are starting much more now than they ever did before.
Adam, thank you for sharing that. One point I think you touched on, which is really important for the audience, is the thinking like the board. I was talking to a board member of a Fortune 500 company, and they asked me point blank, I've got the CFO, the CIO, the CHRO, the Chief Security Officer. What are all their roles and why won't they work together? And for me, that was a real eye-opener to exactly what you talked about, that the successful executives are the ones that work together to solve problems. Adam, Chris, just a couple of takeaways from the session, and thank you for sharing your time. I think first of all, what I'm hearing is it's absolutely critical to be agile and take a strategic view of investments that support business transformation. Being flexible on your feet and having a working partnership between the CFO and CIO are critical for success, and it's more important than ever. And finally, I would say really challenge yourself to think outside of the roles and think about the organization and how you drive value for the whole organization. And with that, I'd like to thank Chris and Adam for joining us today. Great discussion. I very much enjoyed it. And now let's bring it back to our hosts.